In the hushed sanctuary of an old public library, a beloved landmark known simply as the Evergreen, sunlight filtered through tall arched windows onto rows of ancient books and quiet reading nooks. Every day, patrons and staff alike found comfort amid the musty pages and soft rustle of turning leaves. Yet on one autumn afternoon, as a gentle rain tapped on the glass and shadows lengthened across the polished wooden floors, an event unfolded that would shatter the library's placid serenity and expose secrets hidden in its very foundations. It began when Marjorie Thompson, a dedicated librarian with a reputation for her warm smile and encyclopedic knowledge, arrived to open the library for the day. Marjorie had worked at Evergreen for over 20 years and knew every creak in its corridors. As she unlocked the heavy front doors, she was greeted by the familiar scent of old paper and polished oak. But as she walked past the rare books section, an area reserved for first editions and treasured manuscripts, she noticed something amiss. One of the display cases, normally impeccably arranged, sat ajar. Within it, on a velvet cushion that usually cradled a centuries-old volume, lay a lifeless body. The victim was quickly identified as Dr. Eric Lawson, a well-respected professor of history who had been volunteering at the library, curating a special exhibit on local heritage. His face, once animated with intellectual curiosity, was now fixed in a silent, uncomprehending stare. A faint trail of dried crimson meandered along the floor toward an exit, and clutched in his hand was a scrap of paper bearing an unsettling message. "Some truths are better unspoken." Marjorie's gasp did not go unnoticed. Within moments, security and uniformed officers rushed into the reading room, their voices a blend of urgency and disbelief. Detective Lila Monroe, known for her relentless determination and an eye for detail honed over many years on the force, assumed control of the scene. As she knelt beside Dr. Lawson's still form, Lila surveyed the surroundings with quiet intensity. The area was undisturbed, no signs of a struggle or chaotic scuffling, only the eerie calm of a life unexpectedly cut short. The display case had been carefully disturbed, and the positioning of the body suggested a deliberate act rather than a random tragedy. In the hours that followed, Detective Monroe began interviewing library staff and volunteers. Marjorie, still trembling as she recounted the morning's events, explained that Dr. Lawson had arrived early to prepare for the upcoming exhibit on the city's forgotten history. He was excited about a discovery, Marjorie recalled, her voice wavering. He'd been researching documents in the special collections and mentioned that he'd found evidence that might rewrite part of our local history. "I thought it was just his enthusiasm for a good story, but now, I don't know." Other volunteers recalled that Lawson had been increasingly secretive in the past few weeks, often poring over old maps and ledger books, making frantic notes in a worn spiral notebook that he carried with him everywhere. Detective Monroe soon obtained a search warrant for Dr. Lawson's modest apartment in a nearby residential block. Inside, amidst stacks of books and carefully preserved letters, she found more evidence of his private investigation. On a small desk, hidden under a faded tablecloth, lay the spiral notebook. Its pages were filled with meticulous entries that detailed his ongoing research on a series of property transactions and land deals that dated back several decades. One entry, written in hurried ink, noted, "Discrepancies in deeds, hidden clauses in contracts. There's a secret woven into the city's past. I must verify before it's too late." The tone was both urgent and foreboding, as though Lawson had sensed that his discoveries might place him in grave danger. Digital forensics specialists later recovered deleted emails from Lawson's laptop. Among these were several messages exchanged with an unknown correspondent who signed off simply as Mercury. One chilling note warned, "Dig no further, or silence will claim you." Although the sender's identity was masked by layers of encryption, the message resonated with the gravity of Lawson's final words and hinted that powerful forces might be involved in suppressing his findings. As Detective Monroe pieced together the evidence, a broader picture began to emerge, a narrative that stretched beyond a single murder to encompass a tangled web of historical cover-ups. Evergreen Library, cherished as a repository of knowledge and community memory, had long been rumored to hold secrets in its special collections. The institution's rare books and archival documents, meticulously preserved in climate-controlled rooms, included records of disputed land deals, secret societies, and confidential correspondences dating back to the founding of the town. Lawson's research had centered on a particular series of property transfers in the early 1900s, involving a prominent local family known as the Abernoths, whose influence had shaped the community for generations. The Abernoths, once celebrated as civic benefactors, had been quietly embroiled in controversy, allegedly using their wealth to acquire large tracts of land through coercion and dubious legal maneuvers. Lawson's notes suggested that he had discovered documents that contradicted the official narrative of these transactions, implying that significant sums had been funneled into private accounts through secret clauses embedded in the deeds. Determined to follow the trail, Detective Monroe arranged meetings with local historians and archivists. In a cramped back office of the County Historical Society, Dr. Sylvia Grant, a venerable scholar with decades of experience, shared her recollections of the Abernathy legacy. "The family's history is a tapestry of glory and scandal," Dr. Grant said softly, leafing through brittle documents. "There were always whispers of hidden deals and unsavory methods to consolidate power. Few dared to challenge the official records because in our town those who question the past often pay a heavy price." Her words lent a somber weight to Lawson's investigation and underscored the possibility that his murder might have been orchestrated to silence someone who threatened to expose a long-buried secret. Meanwhile, forensic accountants working with the task force uncovered a series of irregularities in the archival records maintained by a local notary public, records that coincided with the property transfers Lawson had been investigating. The notary's logs revealed that certain deeds had been amended shortly after being recorded, with additional clauses inserted in cramped handwriting. Although the changes were minute on the surface, when compiled, they amounted to a significant discrepancy in the historical financial flows. The pattern was too precise to be accidental. It suggested that someone had been meticulously rewriting parts of the town's history for personal gain. The investigation then took an unexpected turn, when an anonymous tip came through in the form of a handwritten letter dropped off at the police station. The note, printed on plain paper with no return address, contained a single sentence: "The past is never truly buried." It was accompanied by a faded photograph of a young woman standing outside a grand old mansion, a building that local lore said had once belonged to the Abernathy family. The image stirred memories among longtime residents and hinted at the possibility that the secrets Lawson had uncovered might extend beyond mere financial discrepancies to involve personal tragedies and long-held grudges. Detective Monroe pursued this new angle by visiting the mansion itself, now a converted community center that had replaced a private estate. The building, with its ornate facade and meticulously maintained gardens, still held an aura of faded grandeur. In the dusty archives of the center, Monroe discovered old letters and legal documents that corroborated the notary's logs. Among these were a series of correspondences between members of the Abernathy family and local government officials discussing matters of land acquisition and the silent transfer of wealth. One document, in particular, was damning: a contract that had been altered after its initial signing, with a clause that effectively nullified the rights of several small landowners in favor of the family's expansive holdings. The discovery provided a tangible link between the historical records Lawson had been investigating and the possibility of a deliberate cover-up that had spanned generations. In the ensuing weeks, the case continued to build in complexity and gravity. Federal agents were brought in to assist with the digital forensics and historical audits, and a joint task force was established to trace the discrepancies in the archival records. As the team dug deeper, they discovered that the irregularities were not confined to a single period, rather they spanned decades, suggesting a long-standing conspiracy to rewrite the town's history. Every new piece of evidence, every altered deed, every whispered account from an elderly resident, every deleted email recovered from Lawson's computer added to the mounting proof that someone powerful was determined to keep the true story hidden. Amid this mounting evidence, Detective Monroe began to receive anonymous phone calls late at night. A distorted voice, low and measured, warned, "Stop searching the records or your own history will vanish." Although the calls were few and far between, they carried a menacing tone that underscored the lengths to which the conspirators were willing to go to preserve their secrets. Far from deterring her, these threats galvanized Monroe. She knew that every layer of secrecy uncovered was another step closer to unraveling the truth, and that the price of silence had already been paid in blood. A breakthrough came when the digital forensics team recovered a nearly intact backup of Lawson's email server. Among the files was a folder labeled Abernathy Project. Within it were detailed spreadsheets and scanned copies of historical deeds that Lawson had painstakingly compiled. The data revealed a series of irregular transfers, property titles that had been amended without public notice, secret clauses inserted into contracts, and large sums of money rerouted to accounts that were hidden from public view. One particularly damning file included a memo with a signature that had been partially redacted, a signature that forensic experts later linked to a prominent local attorney known for representing powerful interests. The memo stated, "Maintain the narrative. No one must question the record." The precise language left little doubt that the alterations were part of a deliberate operation to conceal the true history of land ownership and wealth distribution in the town. Detective Monroe synthesized her findings into a comprehensive case file that detailed every step of her investigation, from the tragic discovery at the library to the uncovered historical documents linking the Abernathy family to a decades-long cover-up. She organized meetings with local historians, legal experts, and even a small group of residents who had once owned land that had been absorbed by the Abernathys. Their stories, laced with pain and a sense of betrayal, confirmed that the historical narrative presented to the public had been carefully manipulated to serve the interests of a powerful few. As federal prosecutors prepared to present their case to a grand jury, the tension in the community grew palpable. The grand jury sessions, held in a modest courthouse that had seen more than its fair share of local disputes, delved into the labyrinthine details of the altered deeds and secret memos. Witnesses testified about whispered warnings and lost inheritances, and the historical records were laid out like pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle. The grand jury eventually returned indictments on charges of fraud, conspiracy, and accessory to homicide, directly linking the cover-up to the tragic death of Dr. Lawson. The trial that followed was a marathon of legal arguments and poignant testimonies. In a packed courtroom where the air was thick with anticipation, federal prosecutors presented a narrative that spanned generations, a tale of how the legacy of a powerful family had been protected at any cost, even if it meant silencing those who dared to challenge the official record. Expert witnesses took the stand, explaining how the minute discrepancies in historical documents, when viewed over a long period, revealed a pattern of deliberate manipulation. One historian, renowned for her work on local property records, presented charts and timelines that demonstrated how the Abernathy family had systematically acquired land by altering deeds and inserting clauses that stripped away the rights of smaller owners. Testimony from local residents, many of whom had lost part of their heritage in the process, brought the human element to the forefront. An elderly man, whose family had once farmed the outskirts of town, recalled with sorrow how his father had been forced to sell their land at a fraction of its worth under mysterious circumstances. "They promised fairness," he said, voice cracking with emotion. "But fairness was a word they used to cover their tracks, to keep us from knowing the truth." His story, along with many others, painted a vivid picture of a community robbed not just of money, but of a part of its collective identity. Throughout the trial, Detective Monroe's own testimony was marked by clarity and unyielding resolve. She recounted her discovery of Dr. Lawson's body in precise detail, the arrangement of the scene, the significance of the torn note, and the painstaking process by which she had pieced together the timeline of events. Her voice was steady as she described the delicate interplay between digital evidence and historical records, emphasizing that the case was not merely about a single murder, but about a systemic effort to rewrite history. The courtroom fell silent as she presented a side-by-side comparison of the original deeds and the altered documents, each discrepancy a stark reminder of the lengths to which those in power had gone to secure their legacy. While several mid-level managers and a few legal representatives connected to the Abernathy cover-up were convicted on charges of fraud and conspiracy, the trial did not deliver a complete sense of closure. Some of the top figures behind the manipulation evaded full accountability by exploiting legal technicalities and corporate shields. The true architect of the altered records, a figure whose signature had been redacted in multiple documents, remained a mystery, their identity concealed behind layers of secrecy and powerful influence. The outcome left many in the courtroom with a lingering sense of injustice, as it was clear that the network of corruption was deeply entrenched, its roots reaching back through decades of deceit. In the aftermath of the trial, Evergreen Library, which had long been a bastion of knowledge and community memory, continued to operate with an air of cautious optimism. The public, now aware of the hidden truths that had been uncovered, rallied for greater transparency and the protection of historical records. Local government officials, spurred by public outcry, instituted new regulations requiring the regular auditing of public documents and the establishment of independent oversight boards. Town hall meetings and community forums became venues where residents debated the importance of preserving history and ensuring that the past would not be manipulated for the benefit of a privileged few. Detective Monroe remained committed to her work, the weight of the case a constant reminder of the price that must sometimes be paid for the pursuit of truth. In the quiet hours before dawn, as the city's lights dimmed and the remnants of the trial lingered in memory, she would return to her office to review the detailed case files. The battered notebook of Dr. Lawson, the digital remnants of deleted emails, and the grainy surveillance footage all served as tangible reminders that even in a place where knowledge is celebrated, the forces of corruption can still cast long shadows over the truth. In subsequent years, the case became a seminal moment in local history, a subject of academic studies and spirited discussions among community activists. It spurred reforms not only in the handling of public records, but also in the ethics of historical scholarship, ensuring that future generations would have access to a more transparent and accurate narrative of the past. For many, the story of Dr. Lawson's unwavering commitment to uncovering the truth and the tragic circumstances of his demise served as both a warning and an inspiration, a reminder that integrity often comes at a steep price, but that the fight for honesty is a battle worth waging. The echoes of that day in the library reverberated throughout the community, in quiet corners of local cafes, in hushed conversations among historians, and in the determined eyes of those who had worked to preserve their town's heritage. The legacy of Dr. Lawson lived on. His efforts had revealed a hidden chapter in the town's story, a chapter filled with exploitation, cover-ups, and the ruthless suppression of dissent. Though many of the conspiracies had been exposed in the glare of the courtroom, the full extent of the manipulation remained an open wound, a reminder that some truths are so deeply embedded in the fabric of society that they defy complete eradication. Detective Monroe's career, now marked by the scars and triumphs of the investigation, continued to evolve. She took on new cases with a deeper understanding that every inquiry into the past could unveil more than just old records. It could uncover the lingering effects of decades of concealed injustice. Each case reinforced her belief that transparency and accountability were the bedrock of a just society, and that the relentless pursuit of truth, even in the face of overwhelming obstacles, was the only way to honor the sacrifices of those who dared to challenge the status quo. As time passed and the seasons turned, the public library remained a symbol of both enlightenment and the struggle to preserve an untainted record of history. Its walls, lined with countless volumes of knowledge, bore witness to the unending battle between those who sought to bury uncomfortable truths and those who dedicated their lives to uncovering them. The story of Dr. Lawson's investigation, with its twists and unresolved questions, continued to inspire a new generation of journalists, archivists, and activists, all determined to ensure that the past would be accessible, honest, and free from the corrosive influence of unchecked power. In the soft glow of early mornings, when the library was nearly empty and the echoes of footsteps whispered among the shelves, visitors could almost sense that every book, every document, held a story waiting to be told. And among those stories, the memory of a passionate historian who had paid the ultimate price for his curiosity would always serve as a quiet beacon, a call to examine the records of our past with diligence and to confront the hidden forces that shape our world. There were no simple resolutions in that struggle, rather it was an ongoing journey, a mosaic of uncovered truths, partial victories, and persistent questions. And in the delicate interplay of light and shadow within the library's timeless halls, the legacy of Dr. Lawson's relentless quest for the truth remained etched into the collective memory of the community, a testament to the enduring power of one voice against the tide of secrecy. Every whispered conversation among scholars, every new policy enacted to protect historical documents, every determined gaze cast upon the dusty volumes in the library, was a small defiant act against the forces of deception. The case had forever altered the course of local history, transforming a quiet institution into a symbol of resistance, a place where the quest for knowledge was not only celebrated but defended against those who would silence it. And as the library's heavy doors swung open each day to welcome new seekers of truth, the story of that fateful afternoon continued to remind everyone that in a world where power can obscure reality, the light of inquiry must never be allowed to dim. The concrete and steel of the urban skate park had long served as both a playground and a proving ground, a place where trick after trick was attempted, where friendships were forged and rivalries sparked beneath the open sky. On a humid summer night, when the park's half-pipes glowed under the soft illumination of streetlights and the sounds of wheels on pavement mingled with distant city hums, a discovery was made that would shatter the familiar rhythm of youthful defiance and community spirit. It began as a routine evening. Skateboarders and BMX riders soared over ramps and rails while graffiti artists left their vibrant signatures on aging walls. The park, known to locals simply as the Ramp, was a cherished haven for creative souls, a microcosm where raw talent met gritty urban culture. In the midst of this nightly ritual, one figure was absent, Dante D. Martinez, a talented and charismatic skater who had become a symbol of hope and perseverance in a community that prided itself on defying expectations. Dante was well known for his smooth style on the board, his innovative tricks, and a rebellious spirit that resonated with everyone who frequented the park. Late that night, as the crowds began to thin and the echo of skateboard wheels gradually subsided, a maintenance worker on his final circuit noticed something amiss near the park's signature half-pipe. Amid a scattered pile of worn skate decks and discarded protective gear lay a body, its form slumped against the smooth concrete surface. The victim, soon identified as Dante Martinez, was sprawled out as if in deep shock, his eyes fixed in a final, unseeing gaze. A single scrap of paper was clutched in his hand, a torn piece of newsprint on which was hastily written a cryptic message: "Some voices vanish when the truth emerges." Within moments, uniformed officers and forensic specialists swarmed the area. The vibrant sounds of the skate park fell silent, replaced by the sharp murmur of radios and the click of evidence markers on the pavement. Detective Jasmine Lee, a dedicated investigator whose calm yet relentless nature had earned her a reputation for peeling back layers of urban mystery, arrived on the scene. As she knelt beside Dante's motionless form, every detail spoke of an act carried out with deliberate precision. There were no signs of a desperate struggle or chaotic scuffling among the nearby ramps, only the cold finality of a life extinguished and a message left behind, as if to warn anyone daring to challenge hidden truths. Detective Lee's first interviews were with the few remaining riders and skaters who had lingered after closing. Rico, a veteran skater with a rough exterior but a deep loyalty to his friends, recalled that Dante had been unusually pensive in the days prior. He'd been checking his phone constantly, scribbling in that battered notebook of his, Rico said, voice low. I asked him what was up, but he just said, "Some things are bigger than us, man. I never thought it would come to this." Another witness, a graffiti artist known only as Sketch, mentioned that Dante had confided in him about a growing suspicion that someone was manipulating the park's atmosphere, not the usual wear and tear, but deliberate tampering with the equipment and even the lighting. Sketch added, "He was on the verge of exposing something. I don't know what it was, but he looked scared." Back at Dante's modest apartment, nestled in an aging residential complex on the outskirts of the neighborhood, Detective Lee and her team discovered personal effects that painted a picture of a young man driven by passion and an unyielding desire to set things right. In a cluttered corner of his living room, among old skate magazines and faded posters of legendary riders, lay Dante's well-worn journal. Its pages, filled with neat, confident handwriting, chronicled his daily experiences at the park. Early entries were a celebration of life on the ramps, the thrill of landing a new trick, the camaraderie among friends, the freedom of endless summer days. Yet, as the entries progressed, a darker tone emerged. Dante had begun recording details about irregularities he noticed in the park's operations. One entry read, "Every week, a few items go missing from the locker room: protective pads, board stickers, even parts of our safety gear. It's like someone stripping the park of its identity, piece by piece." Another, more urgent note stated, "I overheard a conversation about ensuring the operation remains intact, and if I keep asking questions, no one will be left to ask them." The final entry, dated just days before his death, was even more chilling. "I'm onto something that could expose the truth about the ramp. I'm scared, but I have to keep going." Digital forensic experts managed to recover fragments of deleted messages from Dante's smartphone. In one recovered text, an unknown sender, using an alias that simply read Oracle, warned, "Back off or you'll disappear next." The tone was cold and unyielding, lacking any hint of personal sentiment. Though the messages were fragmented, they corroborated Dante's growing sense of dread and provided the first inkling that his investigation had stirred dangerous forces. As Detective Lee delved deeper, she began to focus on the operational side of the ramp. Interviews with maintenance staff revealed that the park's equipment had recently been subject to unusual adjustments. One janitor mentioned that several skate decks and protective gear items were inexplicably missing from the storage room, even though the inventory records showed no corresponding purchases. A young technician noted that the park's lighting system, which had always been reliable, had been behaving erratically on several nights, flickering in patterns that seemed almost deliberate rather than the result of normal wear. These discrepancies, when viewed alongside Dante's journal entries, suggested a pattern of systematic interference that went beyond petty theft. Investigators also turned their attention to the financial records of the organization that managed the skate park. Publicly, the ramp was celebrated as a community resource, funded by local grants and small business sponsors. Yet, internal documents obtained through a confidential source revealed that a portion of the funds had been reallocated on a regular basis, small, almost imperceptible transfers that, when aggregated, amounted to a significant sum. The transfers were labeled under benign-sounding entries like equipment maintenance and facility upgrades, but forensic auditors noted that the figures were inconsistent with the actual expenditures. The evidence hinted at a deliberate misappropriation of resources, a diversion of funds that could have been used for legitimate park improvements, but was instead funneling money into an unknown channel. Detective Lee soon discovered that a few individuals in the park's management had become unusually secretive in recent months. One former supervisor, who had been let go after a series of unexplained internal disputes, recalled that upper management had been issuing vague directives to keep the numbers quiet and to avoid stirring the pot. His testimony, though delivered with a mixture of regret and fear, suggested that the discrepancies might have been part of a larger scheme, one that involved not only the misallocation of funds but possibly even a hidden market for stolen gear and manipulated equipment. A breakthrough in the case came when digital forensic experts recovered a nearly intact backup of Dante's encrypted notes from his smartphone. These notes, when cross-referenced with surveillance data from the park's security cameras, revealed a startling correlation on several occasions. The missing items from the locker room coincided with times when a dark figure, barely visible on grainy footage, had been seen near the storage area. Using enhanced imaging software, detectives were able to isolate a face, partially obscured by a cap and hood, whose features suggested that he was familiar with the inner workings of the park. Though the identification was not conclusive, it provided a potential lead on someone with intimate knowledge of the facility, a person who might have been directly involved in the diversion of equipment. As the investigation advanced, Detective Lee received yet another anonymous tip. This time, a handwritten note was delivered discreetly to her office in a plain envelope. The note, typed in a utilitarian font and devoid of any flourishes, simply stated, "In a world of tricks, some falls are not accidents." The message was cryptic, but it resonated with the mounting evidence that Dante's fate was sealed by a calculated act rather than a random misfortune. The note, combined with the recovered digital evidence and testimonies from current and former employees, painted a picture of a conspiracy that reached deep into the heart of the skate park's operations. Focusing her attention on the management team, Detective Lee zeroed in on one individual in particular, a relatively new hire named Marcus Delgado, who had recently been promoted to oversee facility operations. Marcus, who had a reputation for being efficient and affable, was seen by several witnesses as having taken a keen interest in the inventory records and maintenance logs. When questioned, Delgado offered bland explanations about streamlining processes and ensuring proper accountability. However, his responses were peppered with vague references to internal adjustments that seemed out of place for someone in his position. Delgado's role in approving several of the transfers that forensic accountants had flagged as irregular made him a person of significant interest in the case. At the same time, Detective Lee learned from a veteran skateboarding instructor, a respected figure known simply as Coach in the community, that there had been rumors of internal disputes among the park's management. Some of the higher-ups started arguing about how to run things differently, about taking shortcuts to cut costs, the coach confided. "I heard whispers that if anyone got too close to the truth, they'd be made to disappear. I always hoped it was just talk, but now it seems all too real." The coach's words added a human dimension to the investigation, suggesting that the motives behind the cover-up were as personal as they were financial. Digital forensic analysts soon revealed that a series of small, seemingly insignificant transfers had been scheduled on a strict monthly cycle, each one barely noticeable in the day-to-day reports, but collectively amounting to a substantial sum. The transfers were routed through several intermediary accounts, each registered under generic business names that obscured their true ownership. The pattern was too precise to be accidental. It was the unmistakable sign of a deliberate operation designed to siphon off resources from the park. When these financial irregularities were cross-referenced with the timeline of missing equipment reported by staff, the connection was undeniable. Detective Lee's investigation then shifted toward a confrontation with Marcus Delgado. In a tense meeting at the park's administrative office, a windowless room cluttered with file cabinets and outdated computers, she presented Delgado with the evidence she had gathered. The atmosphere was charged with a mix of apprehension and defiance as Delgado listened. At first he offered stilted explanations about standard adjustments and reallocations for budget purposes. But under the weight of the detailed ledger entries and the corroborating testimonies of former employees, his composure began to crumble. In a moment of resigned frustration, Delgado admitted that he had been instructed by higher management to approve the transfers, an order that, according to him, came with an unspoken promise that any inquiries would be met with unpleasant consequences. His confession, delivered in a low tone, confirmed that the misappropriation of resources was not a rogue act of negligence, but part of a broader, systematic effort to conceal the truth behind the park's operations. As federal agents were brought in to assist with the ongoing investigation, the case took on an even broader dimension. The task force uncovered evidence that suggested the financial discrepancies were linked to an underground market for stolen equipment, a network that extended to local pawnshops and even online auctions. Investigators traced several of the diverted items, including high-end protective gear and specialized components of skateboarding equipment, to sellers who operated in the fringes of the legal market. Interviews with these sellers revealed that the equipment was being purchased in small quantities from multiple sources, making it difficult to detect the pattern of theft. The profits from these clandestine sales, while individually modest, added up over time to a figure that could only have been generated by an organized, premeditated scheme. Meanwhile, Detective Lee continued to receive anonymous warnings. In one unsettling call made from a payphone near the park, a hoarse voice cautioned, "Keep your head down if you value your life." The threat, delivered without context, was a stark reminder that the individuals behind the cover-up were still watching, still willing to use intimidation to prevent further exposure. Rather than dissuade her, these threats only reinforced her determination. Every piece of evidence, from the altered ledger entries to the grainy surveillance footage capturing a mysterious figure, was a step closer to unraveling the full extent of the conspiracy. In a decisive operation coordinated with local and federal authorities, search warrants were executed at several key locations. In a nondescript warehouse on the outskirts of the city, allegedly used as a storage facility for excess equipment, agents discovered a trove of stolen items neatly packaged and labeled with batch numbers that corresponded with the internal records from the ramp. Among the boxes was a detailed spreadsheet printed on crisp paper, listing every missing item, its supposed destination, and the associated financial transactions. The document was a damning piece of evidence, proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the misappropriation had been orchestrated over an extended period by those entrusted with the park's operations. As the case moved toward the courtroom, Detective Lee prepared to present her findings in a series of grand jury hearings. The narrative she constructed was one of quiet defiance, a story of a talented young man who had dedicated his life to uncovering the truth, only to be silenced by those who thrived in the shadows of organized crime. Her testimony was meticulous, recounting every detail of the discovery, every anomaly in the records, every whispered threat that had been received. Expert witnesses, including forensic accountants and digital analysts, took the stand to demonstrate the precise pattern of the missing equipment and the corresponding financial discrepancies. Their presentations, replete with charts, timelines, and digital logs, left little room for doubt that the misappropriation was a calculated operation. The trial stretched over several weeks in a crowded courtroom where community members, journalists, and local advocates gathered to witness the unfolding drama. In a series of poignant moments, former employees recounted the chilling atmosphere that had prevailed in the park's back offices, where questions were met with silence or veiled threats. One ex-employee tearfully recalled how a supervisor had warned him in a low, urgent voice, "Ask too many questions, and you might be next." The courtroom fell silent, as each testimony added weight to the argument that the cover-up was an organized effort driven by greed and a desperate need to keep the truth buried. Ultimately, several mid-level managers and financial officers were convicted on charges ranging from fraud and conspiracy to accessory to homicide, their names etched into the official record as architects of the operation. However, the trial concluded without fully unmasking all the individuals at the top of the chain, those who had orchestrated the misappropriation from behind a veil of corporate legitimacy. The redacted names in several key documents, along with the unresolved identity of the mysterious figure captured on surveillance, left the community with a lingering sense of injustice. Many in the courtroom left with the belief that, while a portion of the network had been dismantled, the upper echelons of the conspiracy continued to operate in the shadows, shielded by legal technicalities and the inherent complexities of corporate governance. In the months that followed, the urban skate park slowly resumed its normal operations. The half-pipe was polished, the ramps reassembled, and the vibrant energy of youth and rebellion returned, albeit with an undercurrent of somber reflection. The community, once united by the thrill of skateboarding and creative expression, now carried with it a new awareness of the fragile balance between innovation and exploitation. Local authorities, spurred by the public outcry, introduced new measures to enhance transparency in operational procedures and to protect whistleblowers from retaliation. Workshops and town hall meetings were organized to educate the community about the risks of unchecked power, and a local foundation was established in honor of Dante Martinez, a tribute to the man whose quiet pursuit of truth had sparked a wave of reform. Detective Lee, though praised for her thorough investigation, found that the case had left an indelible mark on her soul. Every day, as she walked through the skate park and observed the joyful defiance of young riders performing gravity-defying tricks, she was reminded of the darker side of ambition, the cost of uncovering secrets, and the peril that awaits those who challenge established systems. In quiet moments, when the sound of wheels clattering against concrete softened into the gentle hum of the city, she would reflect on Dante's journal, the precise, heartfelt records of a man who had dedicated his life to the pursuit of truth. His words, inscribed in a humble notebook, served as a constant reminder that even in a world that celebrated youth and creativity, the shadows of corruption could linger, waiting to be exposed by those brave enough to look. The trial may have ended with convictions and a series of regulatory reforms, but for many in the community, the story of Dante Martinez remained an unfinished chapter, a narrative of courage, betrayal, and the unyielding quest for accountability. The anonymous warnings, the elusive figure captured in grainy surveillance, and the redacted signatures in hidden ledgers all persisted as reminders that despite legal victories, the forces of corruption were formidable and ever-present. In the years that followed, the case was revisited by investigative journalists, discussed in academic conferences, and even became the subject of local art installations and documentaries. It served as a touchstone for those committed to ethical governance and a testament to the power of one individual's relentless pursuit of the truth. New generations of skateboarders and artists, inspired by Dante's passion, organized events dedicated not only to celebrating their craft, but also to advocating for transparency and integrity in all aspects of community life. Detective Lee's career continued, marked by the lessons learned from that fateful investigation. She approached each new case with the belief that every discrepancy in the system, no matter how minor it appeared, was a thread that could unravel a larger tapestry of deceit. The memory of that humid night in the skate park, when the vibrant energy of youth was abruptly stilled by the harsh reality of betrayal, remained a driving force in her work, fueling her commitment to protect the truth at any cost. Even as the skate park thrived once more, the echoes of that dark night lingered in quiet corners, whispers among longtime skaters, subdued glances exchanged by those who had once witnessed the tragedy, and a persistent vigilance among the community members determined to ensure that no secret would remain hidden forever. The story of Dante Martinez, a man who had dared to challenge the status quo and paid the ultimate price for his convictions, became a legacy woven into the fabric of the park, a permanent reminder that truth, however elusive, is a flame that must be guarded with unwavering resolve. There was no perfect ending, no triumphant climax where every shadow was dispelled. Instead, the case became a mosaic of small victories and enduring mysteries, a continuous struggle against the forces of exploitation and indifference. For Detective Lee, each day was a reminder that the pursuit of accountability was not measured solely by the numbers in a ledger or the convictions handed down in court, but by the relentless, often arduous effort to shine a light on the hidden corners of our collective existence. In the interplay between the exhilaration of skating and the weight of historical injustice, the urban skate park came to symbolize both the vibrant spirit of youthful rebellion and the perennial challenge of confronting corruption. The story of Dante Martinez remained a potent legacy, a call to question, to investigate, and to resist the silence imposed by those in power. It was a tale that transformed an everyday public space into a battleground for truth, where every trick, every fall, every scraped knee carried the subtle reminder that courage is found in the quiet defiance of injustice. And so, as the sun set over the park, and the silhouettes of skateboarders etched fleeting patterns against the twilight, the legacy of one man's quest for truth endured, a legacy that whispered to every onlooker that in the most unassuming places, the battle for integrity is waged every day, and that even amidst the noise and chaos of urban life, the call for accountability echoes loudly for those who dare to listen. The annual Harvest Days County Fair had always been the beating heart of Millbrook, a quaint town where generations gathered amid autumn's crisp air and fields of amber. For weeks the community had eagerly anticipated the festivities, the sound of laughter echoing over carnival rides, the aroma of kettle corn and fresh apples mingling with the chill of early fall, and the promise of traditions passed down through decades. But this year, as twilight fell on the opening night, and the fairgrounds came alive with lights and music, an undercurrent of secrecy began to stir, a current that would soon upend the cherished celebration. Bill Richardson was the fair's longtime coordinator, a man known as much for his warm smile and tireless dedication as for his meticulous attention to every detail of the event. For more than 20 years, he had orchestrated every booth, ride, and performance with a passion that brought the community together. His jovial nature and steady leadership had earned him respect throughout Millbrook. Yet in the weeks leading up to the fair, whispers began to circulate that Bill had been acting differently. Colleagues noted that he spent long evenings poring over old documents in his cramped office, his eyes frequently drifting toward a stack of yellowed newspapers and forgotten case files. At first, his close associates assumed it was simply the stress of coordinating an event of such scale, but soon subtle clues emerged that hinted at something far more troubling. On the second day of harvest days, as families strolled past booths and children squealed with delight on the rides, Bill was seen leaving the administrative tent with a battered leather folder tucked under his arm. He didn't say goodbye or explain his hurried departure. Instead, he disappeared behind a row of storage sheds near the fair's perimeter, an area known only to staff and a few trusted volunteers. When the fair closed that night, his absence was noted by a handful of co-workers, but no one anticipated that it would mark the beginning of a mystery that would haunt Millbrook for years. It wasn't until the following morning that a local groundskeeper, Harold Jennings, discovered Bill's body in one of the outbuildings near the old barn. Tucked away in a rarely visited storage room, Bill lay slumped against a stack of unused chairs. His face, usually animated with enthusiasm, was frozen in a final expression of shock. On the floor nearby, amid scattered papers, lay a torn scrap of paper with a single haunting message: "Some secrets must remain buried." Harold's startled call sent ripples through the fairgrounds, and within the hour, uniformed officers had cordoned off the area. Millbrook, a town where everyone knew everyone else, was plunged into disbelief. How could such a beloved figure be taken from them in such a cold, calculated manner? Detective Rebecca Morales, a seasoned investigator with the state police and known for her methodical approach and empathy for small-town victims, was assigned to the case. Arriving on the scene, she surveyed the modest storage room with a keen eye. There was a deliberate stillness here, no signs of a frantic struggle or haphazard scuffle. The room was unnervingly organized, with boxes neatly stacked along the walls and only the victim's presence shattering its order. Morales noted every detail: the position of Bill's body, the placement of the torn paper, and even the faint scent of old ink and paper that lingered in the air. Each element suggested that the killer had not acted impulsively, but had planned the act with care, leaving behind a message meant to intimidate and to silence. Over the next several days, Morales conducted interviews with the fair's staff and longtime vendors. Marjorie, a bright-eyed assistant who had worked alongside Bill for nearly 2 decades, recalled, "Bill was more than just the fair coordinator. He was our storyteller, the one who kept our traditions alive. Lately, though, he seemed preoccupied, like he'd discovered something he shouldn't have." Others mentioned that Bill had been seen late at night in his office, rifling through stacks of old documents from the town archives. One maintenance worker confided that he had once overheard Bill speaking urgently on the phone about a hidden history and mistakes in the records that no one else seemed to notice. At Bill's small home on the edge of town, a modest weathered bungalow adorned with mementos of past fairs, detectives discovered a trove of personal items that revealed the man's secret life. Among family photos and worn certificates was a battered leather journal, its pages filled with neat, deliberate entries. Early entries were filled with the everyday details of fair preparations, scheduling rides, ordering supplies, greeting vendors. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted. Bill's handwriting grew more intense, and his entries began to detail discrepancies in public records and strange alterations in property deeds dating back to the early 20th century. One entry read, "The deeds don't match the official records. There's a line of transactions hidden from public view, transactions that could explain why certain families in Millbrook have been forgotten." Another entry, written in a shaky hand, stated, "If I dig too deep, they will silence me. But the truth must come out, no matter the cost." The journal revealed that Bill had been investigating a decades-old cover-up involving the powerful Abernethy family, whose legacy in Millbrook was celebrated in local lore but whose past was shrouded in mystery and whispered scandals. Public records corroborated parts of Bill's research. Millbrook's county clerk had preserved decades-old property records that showed irregularities in the land transactions involving the Abernethy estate. Over time, many small plots had been inexplicably transferred to the family's holding company at suspiciously low prices. Some older residents recalled vague rumors of deals struck in secret, conversations in hushed tones over whiskey and cigarette smoke, and of people who had vanished after challenging the official narrative. Bill had begun connecting these threads, convinced that the Abernethy family had manipulated historical records to solidify their wealth and power, erasing any trace of descent along the way. Digital forensics later recovered fragments of deleted emails from Bill's computer in his office. One recovered message, partially obscured by layers of encryption, warned, "Stop asking questions or you'll be silenced." The tone was stark and devoid of emotion, a message that echoed the final line in the scrap of paper found with his body. Although the sender's identity remained unknown, the message suggested that Bill's investigation had alarmed someone who wielded influence in Millbrook, and that someone was willing to resort to lethal measures to ensure that the truth never emerged. Detective Morales expanded her inquiry to include interviews with local historians and archivists who worked in the town's modest museum and library. Dr. Helen Fisher, a curator at the local historical society, recalled that the Abernethy family had always been an enigma. They were revered for their philanthropy and community support, but there was always an undercurrent of caution when their name was mentioned, she said quietly. There were rumors, unconfirmed stories that they had used their resources to cover up certain historical events, to rewrite history in their favor. Few dared to ask too many questions because, in our small town, challenging the established narrative could have dangerous consequences. Dr. Fisher's words resonated with Bill's journal entries and lent credence to the theory that his murder was connected to his efforts to expose this hidden chapter in Millbrook's past. As the investigation deepened, Detective Morales began to piece together a timeline. Bill had been increasingly secretive in the weeks leading up to the fair, meeting with anonymous sources in dim corners of the town and making cryptic notes that referenced final verifications and ensuring the narrative remains unchanged. Surveillance footage from the fairgrounds revealed that on several occasions, a dark sedan had been seen parked discreetly near the Abernethy estate, a building that, despite its regal appearance, had long been a subject of local controversy. The vehicle's presence, coupled with testimonies from longtime residents who recalled unexplained visits by outsiders to the estate, suggested that forces beyond the local community were involved. In one particularly revealing interview, a retired county clerk who had worked at the town office for over 40 years recalled that decades ago, the Abernethy family had been implicated in a series of dubious land deals. Records were altered, signatures were forged, and entire families lost their ancestral lands, the clerk recounted, his voice thick with emotion. But the powers that be made sure that no one would ever challenge those changes publicly. His testimony, combined with Bill's meticulous notes, painted a picture of a cover-up so deeply entrenched that even the historical records themselves had been tampered with to protect a legacy built on exploitation. Detective Morales' team eventually obtained a series of search warrants for several offices associated with the Abernethy Holding Company. In a cramped, unassuming office building near the town center, federal agents uncovered a trove of documents, old deeds, internal memos, and a ledger that tracked a series of property transfers spanning decades. The ledger was a damning piece of evidence. It showed that over a period of 30 years, countless small transactions had been used to transfer land from unsuspecting owners to the Abernethy family. The entries were meticulously recorded, each one signed with a shorthand that, when compared to Bill's journal, confirmed that his suspicions were not unfounded. As the layers of evidence built up, the investigation began to hint at the possible motive behind Bill Richardson's murder. It appeared that his diligent research threatened to expose not only historical wrongdoings but also a continuing legacy of secrecy that benefited a powerful few in Millbrook. Several members of the Abernethy clan, though publicly dignified and generous, were rumored to have used their influence to suppress dissent and maintain their grip on local resources. When Bill's findings began to circulate discreetly among those in the know, a decision was made, one that would ensure his silence forever. The precise manner of his death, staged so carefully in the quiet back room of the library, pointed to a professional execution, a message delivered in cold blood. With the grand scope of the cover-up laid out before her, Detective Morales compiled her evidence into a comprehensive report and presented it to the local prosecutor. In a series of closed-door grand jury sessions held in a modest county courthouse, the testimony of elderly witnesses, the recovered digital files, and the painstakingly transcribed pages of Bill's journal were laid out like pieces of a long-forgotten puzzle. The grand jury returned indictments on charges ranging from fraud and conspiracy to accessory to homicide, charges that implicated several mid-level administrators and indirectly members of the Abernathy family. Although the indictments did not name every individual involved in the conspiracy, they confirmed that a network of cover-ups had been operating for decades, and that Bill Richardson had been a fatal casualty of their efforts to protect their legacy. The trial that followed captivated the small town. In a packed courtroom where local residents sat with bated breath, federal prosecutors presented their case in meticulous detail. Expert witnesses, including forensic historians and digital analysts, testified about the altered deeds, the irregular ledger entries, and the deleted emails that provided a timeline of the conspiracy. One historian presented a series of side-by-side comparisons of original property records and the revised documents, demonstrating how the Abernathy family had systematically rewritten the town's history. The atmosphere in the courtroom was tense, as witnesses recounted the personal tragedies that had resulted from the land deals, stories of families forced to sell ancestral homes at a fraction of their value, of lifelong legacies lost to a corporate juggernaut. Detective Morales took the stand, her voice steady as she detailed the discovery of Bill's body, the evidence recovered from his apartment, and the painstaking digital trail that had linked his investigation to the shadowy corridors of power in Millbrook. Each word resonated with the gravity of a truth that had been suppressed for far too long. The jury listened intently as she recounted the series of anonymous threats and the hidden memos that explicitly warned, "Do not disturb the record." Her testimony was both a tribute to Bill's unwavering dedication and a damning indictment of the forces that had conspired to bury the truth. Despite the compelling evidence, the trial ended with a mix of convictions and unresolved questions. Several mid-level administrators and financial officers were found guilty and sentenced to lengthy prison terms, their names now permanently associated with one of the most significant cover-ups in local history. Yet the top figures behind the conspiracy managed to elude full prosecution by exploiting legal technicalities and invoking the protective shield of their social standing. The most prominent member of the Abernathy family, whose influence had once been considered unassailable, was acquitted on a technicality, a decision that left many in the courtroom with a bitter sense of injustice. The shadow of unresolved culpability loomed large, as the true orchestrator of the scheme remained hidden behind redacted documents and whispered rumors that only a few insiders truly understood. In the aftermath of the trial, Evergreen Library and the county fairgrounds, where the Abernathy legacy had once been celebrated, became sites of quiet reflection and cautious optimism. Community meetings were held in which residents demanded greater transparency in local governance and the protection of historical records. New legislation was introduced to require regular audits of public documents and to create independent oversight boards to safeguard the integrity of local archives. Although the legal verdicts marked a significant victory for those seeking accountability, the unresolved threads of the case continued to stir debate among civic leaders and scholars alike. Detective Morales continued her work with a steadfast determination that belied the personal toll of the case. Late at night, when the fairgrounds were empty and the library's corridors lay silent under the glow of lamplight, she would return to her office to review Bill Richardson's journal and the recovered digital files. Every page, every data fragment, was a reminder of the courage it took to question the official narrative and of the high price paid by those who dared to challenge a legacy built on deceit. Though many of the conspirators had been brought to justice, the chilling possibility that the network of corruption might still be active in unseen corners haunted her every thought. As the seasons changed and Millbrook slowly began to heal from the scars of the cover-up, the story of Bill Richardson's investigation took on a life of its own. It was recounted in hushed voices at community gatherings, discussed passionately at town hall meetings, and even examined in academic seminars on historical integrity and ethical governance. For many, Bill's legacy became a rallying cry for transparency, a symbol of the importance of preserving the truth, even when it challenges long-held beliefs. Local newspapers chronicled the case in a series of investigative reports, and independent filmmakers produced documentaries that explored the intricate interplay between power, history, and personal sacrifice. There were no easy resolutions in the saga of Millbrook's hidden past. The trial had delivered partial justice, but the higher echelons of the conspiracy remained shrouded in mystery. The faded photograph and the anonymous letter that had warned, "The past is never truly buried," continued to circulate among those who remembered the case, a constant reminder that some secrets, however deeply hidden, might still hold sway over the present. Detective Morales often recalled the words from Bill's journal, "If the numbers don't add up, the truth will reveal itself, even if by the light of sacrifice." His quiet determination and his ultimate fate became a beacon for those who believed that integrity should never be compromised, even at great personal risk. In time, Millbrook transformed. The once opaque dealings of the Abernathy family were re-examined, and a new generation of leaders emerged, committed to openness and fairness. The county fair, which had once celebrated the town's prosperity, was rebranded as a festival of accountability, with exhibitions dedicated to uncovering local history and honoring those who had fought for the truth. Even as the echoes of the past lingered, the community began to embrace a future where transparency was not just an ideal, but a reality. A future built on the lessons learned from the sacrifices of those like Bill Richardson. Detective Morales's career continued, shaped by the enduring legacy of the case. Each investigation reinforced her belief that every subtle anomaly, every quietly recorded observation, could be the key to unraveling a web of deception. In the interplay of light and shadow within Millbrook's quiet streets and historic buildings, she saw the power of truth to challenge the status quo. While the case had not provided a neat, conclusive ending, its darker corners still whispered of unresolved mysteries. It had ignited a movement for change that would ripple through the town for generations. As dusk fell over Millbrook each day, the familiar hum of life mingled with the memories of that fateful investigation. The public library, the fairgrounds, and even the old county courthouse bore silent testimony to the struggle between those who would guard the past and those who believed that every secret deserved to be brought into the light. The legacy of Bill Richardson and the enduring courage of those who pursued the truth served as a constant reminder that in a world where power often seeks to obscure reality, the fight for transparency is both a burden and a beacon. In the end, the story of Millbrook's hidden past was not defined solely by legal verdicts or historical documents. It was etched into the collective consciousness of a community that had chosen to confront its own darkness. For every whispered conversation about lost legacies and every determined gaze cast upon aged records, there was a renewed commitment to ensuring that history, in all its complexity, would never again be manipulated for the benefit of a privileged few. Detective Morales often reflected on that autumn afternoon when the quiet sanctuary of the library had been transformed into a scene of unspeakable loss. Her resolve, tempered by the memories of Bill's tireless efforts and the enduring hope of a community reborn, remained unshaken. Every time she walked along the familiar streets of Millbrook or passed by the old fairgrounds, she was reminded that truth is a fragile treasure, one that must be guarded with relentless vigilance, even when it comes at a high personal cost. And so, as the town of Millbrook continued to evolve, a place where every corner held echoes of the past and every new day promised the possibility of redemption, the legacy of that investigation endured. It was a living narrative of courage and sacrifice, a testament to the unyielding power of those who dare to question the official story. In the gentle murmur of community conversations and the quiet determination of reform-minded leaders, the memory of Bill Richardson's final pursuit of truth served as a beacon, a reminder that even when the darkness seems overwhelming, the light of accountability can and will prevail, one uncovered secret at a time.